Greetings! Alright, let's take care of some business. Well, I don't know, I'm looking at Queen G4 check. Good question. Queen G4 check. He could go King H2 or King F2, really. King to F2. Interesting. Well, King F2, Queen H4 check, Rook G3 is forced. Oh, we gotta be careful because this guy is threatening a checkmate on G7 if we move our rook at all. So, our rook really can't move unless it's delivering a check. So, I'm just letting you know. Queen G4 check, King F2, Queen to F4. Yes, that would do it. King G1, Rook takes E1 check, and you're getting hammer-oled. There we go. Now I get to check him and win this rook. That's a checkmate. Okie dokie, now what? Very good. We have, well, pawn takes D6, which threatens D7 check. Rook takes D6, Rook takes D6, Pawn takes D6. He can play Rook takes Knight and stop all of our pawns. While it would take a while to get his A pawn. Not good. Rook takes D6 is basically losing because he's going to be Rook takes, Pawn takes, Rook takes Knight, Pawn takes Rook, King to D7. Oh, actually, he can't take that, right? Yes, he can. King to D7, you go King to Rook, Pawn to B7. He can't do that. He's got a problem. Rook takes D6, he can't take the Rook. Wait, he can take the Rook, he just can't take the Knight. Thought he could take the Knight. That's interesting. That's another possibility of Knight C4. I don't like it's too much up in the air. I much prefer C takes D, and if he rook checks me, King to G4, and then King takes H4. But let's look at this. Rook takes, Pawn takes. Can't really move his king. Four versus 4 over there doesn't really do anything. Realistically, it should not be a problem. This problem shouldn't be this difficult. He really can't do anything special. What if we just leave everything alone? I don't know. We leave it alone. I'm thinking leaving it alone, King G4, because if he plays Pawn takes Pawn, we just played Pawn takes Pawn. He can't do anything anytime soon. But doesn't really do anything either. I'm not liking that. Knight c4, rook takes b4. Knight takes d6. Or you could just go knight c4, d takes c5. Check doesn't do anything really. Everything that I'm looking at, there seems to be a problem with it. What about king to e3, pawn takes, rook b7, king to d3, rook to c7, king to c4, and we defend the pawn. We could also defend it. Knight to a4, but I just don't see how this is working out. It doesn't seem right. Rook takes, pawn takes, and then what is he doing? He's kind of stuck. His king is basically walled off. If you look at it, his king cannot go to e6, e7, d7, or c7, or c8. So his king is completely walled off from the left-hand side of the board and pawns by the knight and the d6 pawn and the f5 pawn. So rook takes, pawn takes. His rook isn't doing much. That's quite bizarre. And maybe we're threatening to play b5. Toughy. I'm going to say rook takes pawn's the right move. Just because this wall that we created here from e6, e7, d7, c7, and c8, this rook is completely walled in. His king is walled out. And this king can just waltz up here. This is way more difficult than anticipated. 1484, you had to think about it more than that. Okie dokie, now what? Oh, look, it's an easy win. Knight checks, rook takes, queen takes rook, you lose. 1685, you saw how fast I ripped that one to shreds. That was 18 seconds, and if you look on the time, it was much faster. I'm like, this, you lose. I was trying to explain it to you. I saw the move, confirmed the move, and explained the move in 18 seconds. You know, it's like, that's terrible. That problem is easy. So that was way simpler. 1587, that was the queen to g4 check. That was to me the toughest problem. Well, that was the second toughest. This was the easiest problem. The second one with the rook takes pawn is more difficult because we're down material and we're allowing the trade of the rooks, which usually is not a good sign. So that was fairly terrific. Much harder problem than 1484. Although, I mean, a 1400 could solve this problem. Rook takes pawn seems like the right move. And it was. Okay, let's look at this again. So rook takes pawn on the surface seems correct, but what separates the men from the boys is that you have to be able to confirm that it's correct. This is the reflexive move that most people would want to play, is rook takes pawn. So in that regard, it probably is solved more likely. It says 44% pass rate. It's solved more likely based on its like curb appeal is what they call it. It looks like the right move to play, and it is the right move. But you have to figure out, if you really want to do it correctly, you figure out that the exchange leaves at this giant line that just divides black's forces for a long time. So, anyone who gets this problem right is getting it partially just by, luck, but it all counts. It's like in a tournament game, man. If you find the move by luck, it counts just as much as if you do it by brilliance. So, this was a harder problem if you wanted to really focus on accuracy, which is what I was doing. So, this one was a joke by comparison. But great problems make you think. If the problem makes you think, it must be a good problem. That's really the best way to evaluate it. So, hopefully you learned something from this one, because I thought it was really good. I'll see you guys later.